Thus have I heard on one occasion the Blessed One was living at Sawati in Jeta's Grove, Anathantindika's Park. There the Venerable Sariputta addressed the monks thus: Friends, Sariputta, friends, friend, they replied. The Venerable Sariputta said this: one of right view is said, friends. In what way is a noble disciple one of right view? Whose view is straight, who has perfect confidence in the Dhamma, and has arrived at this true Dhamma. Indeed, friend, we would come from far away to learn from the Venerable Sariputta the meaning of this statement. It would be good if the Venerable Sariputta would explain the meaning of this statement. Having heard it from him, the monks will remember it. Then, friends, listen and attend closely to what I shall say. Yes, friend, the monks replied. The Venerable Sariputta said this: when, friends, a noble disciple understands the unwholesome and the root of the unwholesome, the wholesome and the root of the wholesome, in that way he is one of right view, whose view is straight, who has perfect confidence in the Dhamma and has arrived at this true Dhamma. And what, friends, is the unwholesome? What is the root of the unwholesome? What is the wholesome? What is the root of the wholesome? Killing living beings is unwholesome. Taking what is not given is unwholesome. Misconduct in sensual pleasures is unwholesome. False speech is unwholesome. Malicious speech is unwholesome. Harsh speech is unwholesome. Gossip is unwholesome. Covetousness is unwholesome. Ill will is unwholesome. Wrong view is unwholesome. This is called the unwholesome. And what is the root of the unwholesome? Greed is a root of the unwholesome. Hate is a root of the unwholesome. Delusion is a root of the unwholesome. This is called the root of the unwholesome. And what is the wholesome? Abstention from killing living beings is wholesome. Abstention from taking what is not given is wholesome. Abstention from conduct in sensual pleasures is wholesome. Abstention from false speech is wholesome. Abstention from malicious speech is wholesome. Abstention from harsh speech is wholesome. Abstention from gossip is wholesome. Uncovetousness is wholesome. Non-ill will is wholesome. Right view is wholesome. This is called the wholesome. And what is the root of the wholesome? Non-greed is the root of the wholesome. Non-hate is the root of the wholesome. Non-delusion is the root of the wholesome. This is called the root of the wholesome. When a noble disciple has thus understood the unwholesome and the root of the unwholesome, the wholesome and the root of the wholesome, he entirely abandons the underlying tendency to lust. He abolishes the underlying tendency to aversion. He extirpates the underlying tendency to view and conceit I am. And by abandoning ignorance and arousing true knowledge, he here and now makes an end of suffering. In that way too a noble disciple is one of right view, whose view is straight, who has perfect confidence in the Dhamma and has arrived at this true Dhamma. Saying, "Good friend," the monks delighted and rejoiced in the Venerable One's words. Then they asked him a further question. "But friend, might there be another way in which a noble disciple is of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma?" "There might be, friends. When, friends, a noble disciple understands nutriment, the origin of nutriment, the cessation of nutriment, and the way leading to the cessation of nutriment, in that way he is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma." And what is nutriment? What is the origin? What is the cessation? What is the way leading to the cessation? There are 4 kinds of nutriment for the maintenance of beings that already have come to be and for the support of those seeking new existence. What for? They are physical food as nutriment, gross or subtle; contact as the second; mental volition as the third; and consciousness as the fourth. With the arising of craving, there is the arising of nutriment. With the cessation of craving, there is the cessation of nutriment. The way leading to the cessation of nutriment is just this noble eightfold path. That is harmonious perspective, harmonious imaging, harmonious communication, harmonious movement, harmonious lifestyle, harmonious practice, harmonious observation, and harmonious collectedness. When a noble disciple has thus understood nutriment, the origin of nutriment, the cessation of nutriment, and the way leading to the cessation of nutriment, he entirely abandons the underlying tendency to greed. He abolishes the underlying tendency to aversion. He extirpates the underlying tendency to view and conceit, "I am." And by abandoning ignorance and arousing true knowledge, he here and now makes an end of suffering. In that way, too, a noble disciple is one of right view, whose view is straight, who has perfect confidence in the Dhamma and has arrived at this true Dhamma. Saying, "Good friend," the monks delighted and rejoiced in the Venerable Sariputta's words. Then they asked him a further question. "But friend, might there be another way in which a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma?" "There might be, friends. When, friends, a noble disciple understands suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the way leading to the cessation of suffering, in that way he is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma." And what is suffering? What is the origin? What is the cessation? What is the way leading to the cessation? Birth is suffering. Aging is suffering. Sickness is suffering. Death is suffering. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are suffering. Not to obtain what one wants is suffering. In short, the 5 aggregates affected by clinging are suffering. That is called suffering. The reason the 5 aggregates affected by clinging are suffering is because they're affected by clinging. And what is clinging? All of the thoughts about and the stories and the concepts and the heavy-duty identification with, I like this, I want it, I want to keep it, I want it always to be the same. And identifying with those thoughts and feelings personally. If craving does not arise, clinging will not come to be. This is why I'm trying to get you to go deeper in your practice and see what happens before your mind starts wobbling a little bit. And the way you attain that is by seeing the slight wobble and relax right then, and eventually you'll go deeper. It is a natural process. You don't have to put quite so much effort into it. And what is the origin of suffering? It is craving, which brings renewal of being, is accompanied by delight and lust, and delights in this and that. Now this is one definition of craving. It's not always about delights in this and that. It's also has aversion to this and that, and trying to stop it from coming up. That is craving for sensual pleasures, craving for being, craving for non-being. This is called the origin of suffering. What is the cessation of suffering? It is the remainderless fading away and ceasing, the giving up, relinquishing, letting go, and rejecting of that same craving. What are your instructions in the meditation? Whenever your mind starts to wobble a little bit and you see that, you let go of that distraction and relax right then. What are you doing when you relax? You're letting go of the craving. Right as soon as you let go of the craving, you'll notice your mind is very clear, your mind is very bright, your mind is very alert. There's no thoughts in it. That's a mind free from suffering, isn't it? So you bring that mind back to your object of meditation. And what is the way leading to the cessation of suffering? It is just this Noble Eightfold Path. That is harmonious perspective. Harmonious imaging. Harmonious communication. Harmonious movement, harmonious lifestyle, harmonious practice, harmonious observation, and harmonious collectiveness. He here and now makes an end of suffering. In that way too a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. Saying, good friend, the monks delighted and rejoiced in the Venerable Sariputta's words. Then they asked him a further question. But friend, might there be another way in which a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma? There might be, friends. When, friends, a noble disciple understands aging and death, the origin of aging and death, the cessation of aging and death, and the way leading to the cessation of aging and death, in that way he is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. And what is aging and death? What is the origin of aging and death? What is the cessation of aging and death? And what is the way leading to the cessation of aging and death? The aging of beings in the various orders of beings, their old age, brokenness of teeth, grayness of hair, wrinkling of skin, decline of life, weakness of faculties. This is called aging. The passing away of beings out of the various orders of beings, their passing away, dissolution, disappearance, dying, completion of time, dissolution of the aggregates, laying down of the body. This is called death. So this aging and this death are what is called aging and death. With the arising of birth, there is the arising of aging and death. And with the cessation of birth, there is the cessation of aging and death. The way leading to the cessation of aging and death is just this Noble Eightfold Path. When a noble disciple has thus understood aging and death, the origin of aging and death, the cessation of aging and death, and the way leading to the cessation of aging and death, he here and now makes an end of suffering. In that way too, a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. Saying, "Good friend," the monks delighted and rejoiced in the Venerable Sariputta's words. Then they asked him a further question, "But friend, might there be another way in which a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma?" There might be, friends. When, friends, a noble disciple understands birth, the origin of birth, the cessation of birth, and the way leading to the cessation of birth, in that way he is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. What is birth? What is the origin? What is the cessation? What is the way leading to the cessation? The birth of beings in the various orders of beings, their coming to birth, precipitation in the womb, generation, manifestation of the aggregates, obtaining of the bases of contact. This is called birth. With the arising of habitual tendency, there is the arising of birth. With the cessation of habitual tendency, there is the cessation of birth. The way leading to the cessation of birth is just this Noble Eightfold Path. When a noble disciple has thus understood birth, the origin, the cessation, and the way leading to the cessation, he here and now makes an end of suffering. In that way too, a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. An interesting thing is that the Buddha, in one of the discourses in the Samyutta, he says there's two ways of teaching the Dhamma, the right way and the wrong way. And the wrong way of teaching the Dhamma is by starting at ignorance and seeing how the cause and effect works. The right way to teach is by starting at aging and death and seeing how the suffering ceases. What's happening in almost all of the countries these days that have Buddhism is they're focusing on suffering, and they're leaving the cessation of suffering alone. And that's really a problem, because it's changed. The First Noble Truth has changed from there is suffering to all life is suffering. Everything is suffering. And that's not necessarily true. You sit in a jhana, that's a pleasant abiding here and now. Is that suffering? I don't think so. What is the cause of suffering? Craving. What do you let go of when you relax? Craving. What do you experience? The cessation of the suffering. Even though it might just be brief. This is why it's so important to develop the habit of seeing that distraction, letting it be, and relaxing right then. Not getting carried away with a little while, not observing that for a little while, but letting it be right then and relaxing. The relaxing step is the difference between what the Buddha taught and everybody else. There was a lot of real brilliant meditators during the time of the Buddha. They had very interesting philosophies that were actually fairly close to the Buddha. But the thing that made the Buddha stand out was his understanding of dependent origination. Now, in every link of dependent origination, you see that there's, every time I read one of these, the first thing you hear about is when a noble disciple understands habitual tendency, the origin, the cessation, and the way leading to the cessation. What am I talking about here? There is the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths and dependent origination are so closely intertwined that you can't take them apart. But we seem to. We talk about the Four Noble Truths and we try to say, well, I'm just going to give a talk tonight on suffering. Everything is suffering. Even happy states are suffering. And on and on and on. But it seems to me like they're missing the point quite a bit. Because they're focusing in the wrong way. They're focusing on the pain. They're focusing on the suffering itself. They're not spending time telling you how to have that suffering cease. What do you want to hear more about? Yeah, you got a pain that's really hard. Let's talk about that pain. That's psychology. Buddhism is not psychology. Buddhism is how the process works. And because we're going backwards, we're starting at aging and death and going to birth and then habitual tendencies and clinging and craving. Because we're going backwards, this is the way you actually notice when a distraction arises. You see it backwards. And as you let go of this one, then that one won't arise anymore. Every link in dependent origination is influenced by craving. So, every time you relax, that's that cessation. This is why the relaxed step is so incredibly important, and why the 6 R's work so well. Because of that extra step of relaxing. So the more you can turn the relaxing step into a habit, so it becomes an automatic, the faster you'll progress with your meditation. This is really, really important. And this step has been left out for I don't know how many years in the instructions by most meditation teachers. And the thing that's really odd is that it's so plain in the instructions, but nobody seems to pay attention to it. I mean, it says, on the in-breath you tranquilize your bodily formation. On the out-breath you tranquilize your bodily formation. How much plainer can you get? But nobody pays attention to that extra step. And that extra step is the one that changes the entire meditation. So that you will be able to see and recognize the different links of dependent origination as they come up. That's the whole point of doing the meditation. To teach yourself how this process really does work. And you're teaching yourself. I'm not teaching. You're going through the direct experience and you're seeing the importance of relaxing and smiling and coming back to your object of meditation. As you see the importance of that more and more, your progress starts to pick up. It gets better. And then you start seeing more and more things that you never even dreamed that were there. This is why this particular way of this discourse is so important, because it's showing you the right way to practice. Saying, good friend, the monks delighted and rejoiced in the Venerable Sariputta's words. Then they ask him a further question. But friend, might there be another way in which a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma? There might be, friends. I really don't like this format, in case you wondered why it sounds like I'm making fun of it. Why would somebody say that there might be over and over again? I mean, really. It's just, yes, there is. Not there might be.
Is that a translation issue, or?
As I remember, it was the same in the Pali text.
It's like he was playing a game.
Yeah, it's like he was playing with them.
So sense of humor.
When, friends, a noble disciple understands habitual tendency, the origin, the cessation, and the way leading to the cessation, in that way he is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. And what is habitual tendency? What is the origin? What is the cessation? What is the way leading to the cessation? There are these 3 kinds of habitual tendency: the sense sphere being, the fine material being, and the immaterial being. With the arising of clinging, there is the arising of habitual tendency. With the cessation of clinging, there is the cessation of habitual tendency, and the way leading to the cessation of habitual tendency is just this Noble Eightfold Path. When a noble disciple has thus understood habitual tendency, the origin, the cessation, and the way leading to the cessation, he here and now makes an end of suffering. In that way, too, a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. Saying, good friend, the monks delighted and rejoiced in the Venerable Sariputta's words. Then they ask him a further question, but friend, might there be another way in which a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma? There might be, friends. When, friends, a noble disciple understands clinging, the origin of clinging, the cessation of clinging, the way leading to the cessation of clinging, in that way he is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. And what is clinging? What is the origin? What is the cessation? And what is the way leading to the cessation? There are these four kinds of clinging. Clinging to sensual pleasure, clinging to views, clinging to rules and observances, and clinging to a doctrine of the self. With the arising of craving, there is the arising of clinging. Now, one of the things that I change for practical reasons. I say clinging is a thinking about. That's your stories, your concepts, your ideas, your opinions. Okay, that all of that is lumped in with clinging to views. And the big one is the clinging to the idea that everything is personal. And that's where we really get caught up. And that's where we try to control feelings with thoughts, or with our concepts, or with our ideas, whatever you want to, with the story. So the more you think about a feeling, the bigger and intense the feeling comes. As you let go of the thoughts and relax, then the feeling becomes just a feeling, and it's not yours personally anymore. And that's a very necessary part for the realization that everything that arises is impersonal. Every thought, every feeling, every sensation, every concept, every opinion, every idea that we have really is part of an impersonal process. But we really get attached, especially to our own views. This is the way I think it works. You hear that big I in there? That's the problem with the views. It's because we start identifying with them and taking them very personally. And then we wind up defending our views and putting down other people's views. And such is the state of the world right now. So, how to overcome this problem? That's the question. And you can't overcome it for anybody else. The only person that can overcome the problem of being attached to your opinions and your views is you. Again, that's why I'm not your teacher. You're teaching this stuff to yourself. I can guide you along and make sure you stay on the path. But that's all I'm doing. This is why there's so much importance in having the hindrances arise. Seeing the hindrances for what they really are. Just part of some impersonal nonsense coming up because of past actions. What are you going to do with it right now? Allow it to be relaxed, come back to your object of meditation after smiling. Then your mind gets pulled back. How did that happen? That's the importance of the hindrance. Because it's showing you the dependent origination, and it's showing you how this process actually does work. And when you see right before you really get pulled away for a period of time, there's something else that comes up, then the next time you've let go and come back and you get distraction, then you see that and let go right then. And you keep letting go more and more quickly, more and more easily. You start staying on your object of meditation for longer periods of time. Easy, right? With the arising of craving, there is the arising of clinging. With the cessation of craving, there is the cessation of clinging. The way leading to the cessation of clinging is just this Noble Eightfold Path. When a noble disciple is thus understood clinging, the origin, the cessation, and the way leading to the cessation, he here and now makes an end of suffering. In that way too, a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. Saying, good friend, the monks delighted and rejoiced in the Venerable Sariputta's words. Then they asked him a further question. But, friend, might there be another way in which a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma? Take a guess.
There might be.
There might be, friends. When, friends, a noble disciple understands craving, the origin, the cessation, and the way leading to the cessation. In that way, he is one of right view and has arrived at this true doctrine. And what is craving? What is the origin? What is the cessation? What is the way leading to the cessation? There are these 6 classes of craving. Now this is an interesting thing. I don't know if you noticed when I was doing the 6 sets of 6, we stopped at eye craving, ear craving, and clinging doesn't have the 6 sense bases in it anymore. So you don't call it eye clinging. It's just because this is where your views are, this is where your opinions are, and all of that. And this is your story about why. So it doesn't directly, it's not directly affected by the 6 sense bases. When you get to craving, that's the end of it. There are these 6 classes of craving. Craving for forms, craving for sounds, craving for odors, craving for flavors, craving for tangibles, craving for mind objects. With the arising of feeling, there is the arising of craving. With the cessation of feeling, there is the cessation of craving. The way leading to the cessation of craving is just this Noble Eightfold Path. When a noble disciple has thus understood craving, the origin, the cessation, and the way leading to the cessation, he here and now makes an end of suffering. In that way too, a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. Saying, good friend, the monks delighted and rejoiced in the Venerable Sariputta's words. Then they asked him a further question. But friend, might there be another way in which a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma? There might be, friends. When, friends, a noble disciple understands feeling, the origin of feeling, the cessation of feeling, and the way leading to the cessation of feeling, and that way is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. And what is feeling? What is the origin? What is the cessation? What is the way leading to the cessation? There are these 6 classes of feeling. Feeling born of eye contact, feeling born of ear contact, feeling born of nose contact, feeling born of tongue contact, feeling born of body contact, feeling born of mind contact. With the arising of contact, there is the arising of feeling. With the cessation of contact, there is the cessation of feeling. The way leading to the cessation of feeling is just this Noble Eightfold Path. Then when a noble disciple has thus understood feeling, the origin, the cessation, and the way leading to the cessation, he here and now makes an end of suffering. In that way, too, a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. Saying, good friend, the monks delighted and rejoiced in the Venerable Sariputta's words. Now, when we're talking about feeling, when you first notice the feeling, if you relax right then the craving won't arise. And if the craving doesn't arise, then the clinging doesn't arise, and all this other stuff. The link between feeling and craving is very important. Craving is actually the weak link in dependent origination. Why? Because you can notice it more easily than you can any other of the different parts of the dependent origination. Because it always manifests as tension and tightness. Always. So it's most easy to recognize. That's why it's considered to be the weak link. And also, the craving arises at each one of the links of dependent origination. So every time a different aspect of the dependent origination arises, there is some tension and tightness there. So you need to relax. And it gets subtle. There's no getting around it. It gets really subtle. That's why you try to keep your meditation going all the time, so that you can get to those states that are so quiet that you can see the subtleness in the little tiny things. Don't take breaks just to go think about this or that. Keep your meditation going. That's how you're going to progress the fastest. And you've been here, what, 3 days, 4 days now? You got 3 more days before our hajj. 7 days, right?
Right. No problem.
It can happen very fast. Believe me, it can. Saying, good friend, the monks delighted and rejoiced in the Venerable Sariputta's words. Then they asked him a further question. But, friend, might there be another way, in which a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma? There might be, friends. When, friends, a noble disciple understands contact, the origin of contact, the cessation of contact, the way leading to the cessation of contact. In that way he is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. What is contact? What is the origin? What is the cessation? What is the way leading to the cessation? There are these 6 classes of contact. Eye contact, ear contact, nose contact, tongue contact, body contact, and mind contact. With the arising of the sixfold base, there is the arising of contact. With the cessation of the sixfold base, there is the cessation of contact. The way leading to the cessation of contact is just this Noble Eightfold Path. When a noble disciple has thus understood contact, the origin of contact, the cessation, and the way leading to the cessation, he here and now makes an end of suffering. In that way, too, a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. Saying, good friend, the monks delighted and rejoiced in the Venerable Sariputta's words. Then they asked him a further question. But friend, might there be another way in which a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma? There might be, friends. When, friends, a noble disciple understands the sixfold base, the origin of the sixfold base, the cessation of the sixfold base, and the way leading to the cessation of the sixfold base. In that way is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. And what is the sixfold base? What is the origin, the cessation, and the way leading to the cessation? To the cessation? There are these 6 bases: the eye base, the ear base, the nose base, the tongue base, the body base, and the mind base. With the arising of mentality, materiality, there is the arising of the sixfold base. With the cessation of mentality, materiality, there is the cessation of the sixfold base. The way leading to the cessation of the sixfold base is just this Noble Eightfold Path. When a noble disciple has thus understood the sixfold base, the origin, the cessation, and the way leading to the cessation, he here and now makes an end of suffering. In that way, too, a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. Saying, good friends, good friend, the monks delighted and rejoiced in the Venerable Sariputta's words. Then they asked him a further question. But friend, might there be another way in which a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma? There might be, friends. When, friends, a noble disciple understands mentality, materiality, the origin, the cessation, and the way leading to the cessation, in that way he is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. And what is mentality, materiality? What is the origin? What is the cessation? What is the way leading to the cessation? Feeling, perception, volition, contact, and attention. These are called mentality. Got it? Okay. feeling, perception, volition, contact, and attention. These are called mentality. Okay? The four great elements and the material form derive from the four great elements. These are called materiality. So this mentality and materiality are what is called mentality and materiality. With the arising of consciousness arising, there is consciousness, what am I saying? With the cessation of consciousness, there is the cessation of mentality and materiality. The way leading to the cessation of mentality and materiality is just this Noble Eightfold Path. When a noble disciple has thus understood mentality, materiality, the origin, the cessation, the way leading to the cessation, he here and now makes an end of suffering. In that way, too, a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. Saying, good friend, the monks delighted and rejoiced in the Venerable Sariputta's words. Then they asked him a further question. But friend, might there be another way in which a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma? There might be, friends. When, friends, a noble disciple understands consciousness, the origin of consciousness, the cessation of consciousness, and the way leading to the cessation of consciousness, in that way he is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. And what is consciousness? What is the origin? What is the cessation? What is the way leading to the cessation? There are these 6 classes of consciousness. You can think of consciousness as potential. Because unless there's contact, there is no consciousness arising. Now, what they're talking about here is there is the ability for having the eye consciousness, the ear consciousness, and the rest to arise, but it has to wait until there's contact. Eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, and mind consciousness. With the arising of formations, there is the arising of consciousness. With the cessation of formations, there is the cessation of consciousness. The way leading to the cessation of consciousness is just this Noble Eightfold Path. When a noble disciple has thus understood consciousness, the origin, the cessation, and the way leading to the cessation, he here and now makes an end of suffering. In that way, too, a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. Saying, good friend, the monks delighted and rejoiced in the Venerable Sariputta's words. Then they asked him a further question. But, friend, might there be another way in which a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma? There might be, friends. When, friends, a noble disciple understands formations, the origin of formations, the cessation of formations, and the way leading to the cessation of formations, in that way he is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. What are the formations? What is the origin? What is the cessation? What is the way leading to the cessation? There are these 3 kinds of formation. With the arising of ignorance, there is the arising of formations. What are the 3 kinds of formations? There are these three kinds of formations: the bodily formation, the verbal formation, and mental formation. With the arising of ignorance, there is the arising of formations. With the cessation of ignorance, there is the cessation of formations. What is ignorance?
Not seeing
Not seeing what?
what's there.
Not seeing and understanding the Four Noble Truths. That's what ignorance is. When a noble disciple has thus understood formations, the origin, the cessation, and the way leading to the cessation, he here and now makes an end of suffering. In that way, too, a noble disciple is one of right view, and has arrived at this true Dhamma. Saying, good friend, the monks delighted and rejoiced. They do a lot of delighting and rejoicing in the sutta, don't they? In the Venerable Sariputta's words. Then they ask him a further question. But, friend, they keep on asking the same question over and over again. Might there be another way in which a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma? There might be, friends. When, friends, a noble disciple understands ignorance, the origin of ignorance, the cessation of ignorance, and the way leading to the cessation of ignorance, in that way he is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. What is ignorance? What is the origin? What is the cessation? What is the way leading to the cessation? Not knowing about suffering. Not knowing about the origin of suffering, not knowing about the cessation of suffering, not knowing about the way leading to the cessation of suffering. This is called ignorance. With the arising of the taints, there is the arising of ignorance. With the cessation of the taints, there is the cessation of ignorance. The way leading to the cessation of ignorance is just this noble eightfold path. When a noble disciple has thus understood ignorance, the origin of ignorance, the cessation of ignorance, and the way leading to the cessation of ignorance, he here and now makes an end of suffering. In that way, too, a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. Saying, good friend, the monks delighted and rejoiced in the Venerable Sariputta's words. When they ask him a further question, but friends, might there be another way in which a noble disciple is one of right view, whose view is straight, who has perfect confidence in the Dhamma, and has arrived at this true Dhamma? There might be, friends. When, friends, a noble disciple understands the taints, the origin of the taints, the cessation of the taints, and the way leading to the cessation of the taints. In that way he is one of right view, and whose view is straight, who has perfect confidence in the Dhamma and has arrived at this true Dhamma. And what are the taints? What is the origin of the taints? What is the cessation of the taints? What is the way leading to the cessation of the taints? There are these three taints. The taint of sensual desire, the taint of being, and the taint of ignorance. With the arising of ignorance, there is the arising of the taints. With the cessation of ignorance, there is the cessation of the taints. The way leading to the cessation of the taints is just this noble eightfold path. When a noble disciple has thus understood the taints, the origin of the taints, the cessation of the taints, and the way leading to the cessation, he entirely abandons the underlying tendency to lust. He abolishes the underlying tendency to aversion. He extirpates the underlying tendency to the view and knowledge and conceit I am. And by abandoning ignorance and arousing truth, he here and now makes an end of suffering. In that way too a noble disciple is one of right view, whose view is straight, who has perfect confidence in the Dhamma, and has arrived at this true Dhamma. That is what the Venerable Sariputta said. The monks were satisfied and delighted in the Venerable Sariputta's words. So that's exactly how dependent origination works. Exactly. Precisely. Can't get any closer than that. And the trick is to be able to see it for yourself and to understand it, because that is the way that you attain Nibbana, through the understanding of how this whole process works. And I know that there are some people that teach impermanent suffering and not self is the way to attain Nibbana. But you can see one or all of those links without ever seeing dependent origination. But when you see dependent origination, you always see these links. So it's a real interesting phenomenon to be able to delve deeper in your practice and see how the process works, and to be able to catch it more and more quickly and more easily as your mind gets more calm and peaceful and composed. Got any questions?
Alright.
Go ahead.
So, let's say somebody sees, attains Nibbana, do they change, or,
Yes.
like, okay, that's what I was figuring. Like, they're still...
But the real change, see, one of the things that happens when we start talking about Nibbana, that's the big cloud in the sky everybody's reaching for. But you will have the opportunity to attain Nibbana, and that is called gaining path knowledge. But the real personality change doesn't occur until you have fruition knowledge. And fruition knowledge is, again, seeing the cessation of perception and feeling, seeing dependent origination arise and pass away again, and then having another experience of Nibbana. And that's called the fruition. When you talk about the good qualities of the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha, when you're talking about the kind of individuals that are worthy of gifts and veneration, there are these 8 kinds of individuals. That is Sotapanna and Sotapanna with fruition, Saktagami and Saktagami with fruition, Anagami and Anagami with fruition, Arahat and Arahat with fruition. It might happen fast for you, it might happen slow. It might be a few years before you get to the fruition. Now there is a sutta that talks about this and the importance of, if you have this attainment, you need to keep your precepts very, very closely. You don't go back into the way you used to be, or you can lose the attainment.
So it's not permanent?
Not until there's fruition.
Okay.
So when you jump in the stream, you don't automatically come out the other side. You have to go with the flow, and the flow is always seeing dependent origination, seeing how it works all the time in all situations, and seeing how everything really, truly is impermanent and impersonal. So, even though you have the attainment of Nibbana, you still have some work to do. And one of these days I'll pull out this other sutta and show you. So you go through some slight change at first, yes you do. I mean, you walk around smiling for a while. And it's really quite an interesting experience. And then as you start getting used to it, that's when your work really needs to take off and continue. And how fast you get to the fruition is entirely up to you. The more serious you are with seeing how dependent origination works and the realizations that come along with it, they're pretty amazing. But if you say, well, I'm just going to go back and get back into my old lifestyle, then you can pretty much kiss off that attainment. But I've seen these kind of things happen. I've seen people say, well, it doesn't matter whether I break these precepts or not. I've already attained this. It doesn't matter whether I give in to my lust and my hatreds and all of this, because I'm already attained. And they've got some major problems.
That, to me, doesn't sound like they really attained it if they are saying, well, I'm going to go ahead and play with my hatred and this and that, and that would tell me that they never really attained it. Like,
they could very well have seen it, but they're not taking it seriously.
So it's the difference between sort of a flash insight and having integrated it
Yes.
okay.
structurally.
It takes a while to integrate it.
Yeah.
For some people, it just takes a few days. For other people, it might take a couple of years.
Force of habit's got some inertia.
Yeah,
Mm.
it does.
So the implication, I was just trying to, of the structure of that sutta, is to get right view, you got 12 different ways to get right view.
Actually 13.
13.
Oh, well, 14, because you got nutriment too.
That's right. But another way of looking at it is the right view, you need all 14 to say it.
Yeah.
Okay. Because each time he said, well, is there another way you can get right view? So, well, this is another way, but no, but really what it's talking about is this is another part of right view.
Yeah.
It's not another way of getting it, it's just another part of it.
There might be, friends.
so it's kind of like a TV screen. You see the little dots, and then when you put all the little dots together, you sort of see the complete picture.
Yeah.
So it'd be like all 14 dots. Once you see all 14, you can see the complete picture.
And that's in this presentation.
So,
In the Upanishad Sutta, you can get 23.
Yeah, that's my bet.
do you think these talks were originally given in that particular form and structure?
I think a lot of them are very close.
Because from our perspective, it seems like so highly.
It's a drill.
Yeah.
You know, it was a drill.
And I cut out a lot of the dots. You didn't notice that. but I didn't do a lot of the repeating that there is. And when you get the repeating, it is really, really good. I mean, did you see the effect of listening to the 6 sets of 6 had on you with all that massive amount of repeating? Really sticks in your mind, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And that's the way the Buddha did it. He was doing it, and he was, everybody during that time, they had written language, but they didn't like written language very much. They liked memorizing the things that were important. So they needed to hear everything 3 times. Because you really got it when you hear it 3 times. And I am in the process of taking the Majjhima Nikaya and taking the ditto marks out. Then I want to propose to Wisdom Publications to make MP3s with somebody reading the suttas with all of the ditto marks taken out. And you're not going to hear my voice doing that. I don't read well enough. My dyslexia keeps on jumping around.
Yeah.
We'll try for Morgan Freeman.
James Earl Jones.
Yeah.
These are
James Earl Jones is a stutterer.
I know.
George Bush.
He's worse than I am. That wouldn't work.
I hope you don't, this is all on tape.
Uh-oh.
It's okay.
I think, I don't know what Nate's talking about.
Well, we'll take a look. Is it still going?
Got
We got
this.
juice. Okay, let's share some merit. Made suffering once, be suffering free. The fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find grieving. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation.